What's happening? Welcome here to Lacrosse Now. Travis Eldridge, Tom Eschen back with you once again this week. A Merry Christmas week to those celebrating. Happy holidays to everybody out there. And we've got some special gifts to hand out to people in the lacrosse community for this holiday edition of the show.
Including a conversation with Bill Tierney, the Denver head coach.
That's a gift that keeps on giving.
That's a gift unto itself, as they say. We also are debuting our NLL Power Rankings this week. Another gift for you as well. So, and we also do another preview week, America East and the MAAC men and women. We picked the favorites there.
Yeah, so gifts all around. 'Tis the season, and we're going to hook you all up. So, but we're going to start by giving out gifts to people in the lacrosse community.
We're actually going to do this.
We're doing this. This is a segment. Hypothetical gifts. I don't know if we're hitting UPS because I don't think it is time to get there.
That was like December 15th, I believe, was the last day that you could have done that.
We missed the date, but it's the thought that counts. And so, Tom, you want to kick us off? Who are you giving a gift for?
Yes, I guess I will begin this. I'm going to give the University of Maryland lacrosse team, the men's team, the gift of time in 2022. Because
that's a big gift.
The last two tournaments they've had, time has not necessarily been their friend. Look at this past spring in which they played Virginia in the national championship game. Maryland had all the momentum in the fourth quarter. They went on a huge run with 6 minutes to go. I believe they scored 4 straight goals, a 4-goal run. It was a 1-goal game with 3:57 to go, and then Virginia did get a goal, and then Maryland scores again with 11 seconds on the clock. They win the face-off, and the shot from the face-off guy is stopped by Alex Strode. Of course, he made an incredible save. But if you imagine there was maybe 3 or 4 minutes left in that game, Maryland might win the championship, and Jared Bernhardt celebrating 2 titles. And you go back to 2019 when Maryland had the lead in that game against Virginia in the quarterfinals. Virginia came storming back. I think that was, what, a 5-goal run to tie, a 6-goal run to win in overtime. Of course, there was a controversial goal with the ball that went just inside the post or wherever it might have been that was ruled a no goal. But they also could have used maybe the clock to move faster there. So in 2022, I want to give the Maryland men's lacrosse team the gift of time, however they want to manipulate it.
I was going to say, do they get more or less of it?
I guess you could use the time they had. I don't know, but I think they should be able to manipulate it whenever they see fit in 2022, and that it won't be a factor in whatever their next game of substantialness is.
I didn't know you could give time, but I may start. Can I steal that from some people in my life?
That is a concept, Travis, in which you give someone the gift of time for Christmas or just in life. That is a thing. That is a concept, and you're giving your time and your effort and your energy to another person.
I will say, before this had come up with some of the year-end stuff that we've been looking through, I forgot for like a second how great the end of that national championship game between Virginia and Maryland was. I mean, that was an all-time epic. It kind of gets, I mean, when you judge them, you look at that North Carolina and Maryland championship game from 2016, a couple years ago, the overtime thriller. Yeah. That, I think, to me, is still one of my all-time favorites just because, and the viewership showed it on ESPN. But the close of Virginia-Maryland was everything you could have asked for.
I was going through it yesterday. I forgot how important that time was and how big the Maryland run was at that fourth quarter to get back themselves into it. I almost forgot about that run that enabled them to have a chance to win that face-off and go down there and tie the game.
Because it was like, Virginia, this thing's over. Yeah. Like, championship. And then all of a sudden, it was like another and another, and then all it.
Yeah, 6 minutes on the clock, I believe, was Virginia had that lead.
Impressive.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I'm going to stick with Maryland for my next gift, at least a former Terp. You mentioned Jared Bernhardt, now a national champion in Division II football with Ferris State from this past weekend. Just lit it up. He didn't even play the second half. That's how big Ferris State ran away with the national championship game. But to him, a new pair of football cleats. I'm a little bit more logical here in terms of what I'm trying to
I'm pretty sure my logic was fine. I don't know. Maybe tangible?
Tangible,
yes.
A little more tangible with my gifts. Brand new pair of football cleats because you can hang up the lacrosse cleats. In my estimation, what we saw from Jared Bernhardt throughout the college football season, and I know it's at the Division II level, but when you look at what he's doing, I don't care what the competition is. Like, for him to do that at the collegiate level, he's got to get a chance to play this sport at the next level. We talked a little bit about it in comparing what he's trying to do to what Pat Spencer's trying to do in basketball last week. Listen to that podcast if you haven't. But, I mean, you look at him nationally in what he did in Division II. He ran for more than 1,200 yards as a quarterback. And I know he was kind of used as primarily a running type guy, but as a quarterback, ran for more than 1,200 yards. That was 12th in the country in Division II amongst anybody, running backs, whatever you want to consider. 12th in the country. He was the top quarterback, as you may assume. And 3rd in the country in rushing touchdowns in Division II. So if you look at last year, I went back to the draft. There were 3 Division II players drafted, most of them anywhere from the 5th through the 7th rounds. I just can't imagine a guy with his upside, his athleticism. You look at what he did in the lacrosse field, so you know he's a great athlete. I just can't imagine whether it's the tail end of the draft, somebody taking a flyer on him as a receiver, running back type kind of slot guy who can do a couple of different positions, or getting signed as an undrafted free agent. I just can't imagine he doesn't end up in a camp somewhere for the pure intrigue of, hey, look at what this guy was doing at the collegiate level, and now let's just give him a shot and see what happens. Because you look at all these offensive minds in the NFL now, everybody wants that kind of guy. Like, who's a guy we can put in a couple of different positions, put in a couple of different plays, and let him use his athleticism to make something happen. It's kind of, all these guys are looking for pieces that are maybe a little different. Jared Bernhardt, that athleticism is setting him apart. He is a different kind of athlete.
And he also didn't play football for 4 years.
Right.
He comes back and understands some of the concepts and the ways to move, which is a bit different than on the lacrosse field, of course.
Yeah.
That you're moving on a football field. So for him to be able to come back that quickly and be that productive and be able to find the holes in the defense, obviously as a running back, you have to be able to do that and have the vision and the awareness, I think, shows a lot about his IQ and his acumen and his awareness on the football field. Of course, his father, a big part of that,
yeah.
and all that. So that should help him moving forward. And like you said, these teams looking for smart, athletic players.
And it's a copycat league. And as much as we joke about Chris Hogan, like, there are going to be comparisons to Chris Hogan strictly because of the lacrosse thing. And Chris Hogan, despite the tail end trying to hang on here at the end of his career, had a pretty legitimate career in terms of being a receiver in the NFL. Did some really good things for a couple of years in New England. Was a guy in Buffalo that was a legit threat every time he took the field. That is going to help Jared Bernhardt more than it hurts him.
We will see. If he gets a shot, we'll see if he takes advantage of that opportunity. We'd love to see him get one.
So football cleats for Jared Bernhardt. I don't think he needs my gift of football cleats, but I'm going to give them to him.
That's very kind of you. All right, my next gift will be an extra ACL to anybody in the lacrosse world that needs one. So this is just
giving some big gifts,
I'm
man.
just, it's really tough because the Izzy Skane news, I was thinking about it.
Brutal.
Man, I mean, Northwestern had sort of found their way back to prominence the last season and making that run the championship weekend. And Izzy Skane, such a great example of that. She's so great for the sport. I know she's going to be back, but just to hear that news and know that Northwestern's going to be, and we are going to be without one of the best players in the country for a full season again, after what happened to Emily Harashuk, Megan Carney with Syracuse, Lizzie Colson for Maryland also tore her ACL in the past. So this is something that we know is a trend, and that happens. I just don't want it to happen to anybody else for the spring. I want everybody to be at full strength. You hopefully, fingers crossed, have the Ivy League back. I just want these teams and these players to be able to play at the utmost of their potential and not have to deal with this. So an extra ACL for everybody.
I think the disappointing thing about the ACL injury is it's the time it takes to get back. The positive is that the unfortunate thing is we've had so many people go through it that it happens, and a player, I think, probably has to have in the back of their minds, like, okay, this has been done before, so I can come back.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't detract and stop the fact that is just brutal news, especially for a college athlete that's trying. You only have a limited amount of time on campus. And I know you can get extra years, whatever, but it's just not the same. And so to have a year like that taken away because of an injury, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
So I'd like that.
I'd like to give one to everybody, but I don't have that many to give. So just
I will
to the lacrosse world at this point.
Are you giving your ACLs or?
I just have
feel
a
like
few.
You need those.
They're just in a barn.
Oh, okay.
In the back.
Not going to ask where you got them. Anyway, I'm going to go back to something.
Got really weird really quickly.
Really weird. I'm going to go back to something that people actually can grab here. And it's to the ACC men's coaches. I guess you could probably include the women's coaches here, but mainly the men's coaches. A year subscription to the Calm app. Because, I mean, you look at this league, and we saw it last year in the men's side. But 4 of the top 5 teams in the country at the end of the year were in the ACC. And then you have Syracuse, who you know is going to be around. And maybe Georgetown sneaks into the top 5 here in the preseason, but you could argue that Notre Dame, Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse is going to be in that mix. Virginia, they're all going to be in the top 5 or 6. Syracuse is probably going to end up somewhere in the top 12 to 15. And so you have all those teams, and then you got to play each other in a round robin, and then you got to play each other in a tournament. I just, like, these guys when you go through that gauntlet and you look at what Duke was doing with Notre Dame, like Notre Dame's up a handful of goals in the fourth quarter. Duke comes back. You go to overtime. I mean, every game is a thriller, and I can only imagine what it does to the stress level for some of these coaches. So a year subscription to the call.
Does that give them like the sound of like the rain?
Yeah, there's meditation in there, all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about the coaches when you were talking about that, and they all probably could use it. They are all pretty.
Except for Lars Tiffany. I mean.
Yeah, but he's intense in a different way.
It's true.
You're right. He does come across maybe as mellow, but I feel like his intensity is in a different light where he might need to calm down a little bit when he gets all excited about something or whatnot. But
our conversation with Lars Tiffany is what really brought this up because we were joking about how it's the SEC of lacrosse, and he said we need a Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Just need one in there where everyone's like, maybe, I mean, nothing against Vanderbilt, but they're not to the level of an Alabama or Auburn. Just somebody who's going to take some lumps every once in a while.
Yeah, and really, it's a war of attrition, and at the end of the day, who can survive and advance, really, and that's a regular season mentality.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, you're looking at 5 tournament teams.
Yeah.
Again. And that's just for 100% of a conference. And I know it's small, but for 100% of a conference to be head of the NCAA tournament is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there you go. Calm app to all the ACC coaches. So let's move on here, and we're going to go indoors to the NLL. A gift to you, our first power rankings of the season. We're a couple of weeks in here, Tom, so a chance for us to kind of feel out everybody and try to put together a list of where they fall, at least at this point of the year.
Yeah, you go first, Travis. That's fine.
Okay, well,
we went back.
We fought over the number 1 spot. Look, we can have this conversation. There are a couple of teams at the top. They're both in the East. You got Halifax, the Thunderbirds, and the Buffalo Bandits. Both of them are 2-0 so far this season. I like Buffalo, and your argument is valid in terms of the type of wins, in terms of the teams that each of these teams have played so far this season. The reason I like Buffalo and give them the slight edge over Halifax at this point is you look at this lineup, and they've got the best all over the floor. They have the best goalie. That's been proven over the last several years in Matt Fince, and he's once again leading the league in save percentage in the early part of this season. You also have, I think, in my estimation right now, the best forward in Dane Smith, and you surround him with all these other amazing pieces. You've got Connor Fields, who's having a terrific season so far, really getting a chance to see him completely healthy, all in on the floor after he came over from San Diego. I really like him. Obviously, Josh Byrne is terrific. We've seen what he's done on the floor and outside the last several seasons in both the PLL and NLL. They've got pieces everywhere. So you have the best forward, in my estimation, in the league, and the best goalie, and everything in the middle is filling in. I just think this team, on paper, is the most talented in the league, and that's why I give them the edge.
And just not on paper. I think you've seen them. And
I mean, they're showcasing.
But the power ranking's all about. The eye test, I believe, was your argument to me.
I like the eye test.
Yes.
They're taking care of business, and it's not. It looks like it's easy for them.
Matt Fince leads the league, obviously, save percentage, 85%. You mentioned Connor Fields, and I was curious with Corey Small moving on to Philadelphia if they could fill that void, because Corey Small is sort of a sneaky good scorer in this league for a long time, and he has done that. Connor Fields, second on that team and working, obviously, from the left hand, filling in that void as well. He's got 8 goals, 3 assists this year. So I love what he has brought to that dimension of that team, and maybe even a bump up from Corey Small. Who knows if he can keep this up all season long.
Yeah.
I just liked Halifax's wins a little bit better. They beat Saskatchewan. They beat Toronto. They've done this without Cody Jamieson as well. Clark Peterson's had a really good start. We get to settle this all January 22nd, 2022 when they play. So
we get to wait a couple of weeks.
Yes.
But then we'll figure it out. Or if somebody slips up, then maybe it changes the power rankings altogether.
Let's go 3, 4, 5 here, because
Yeah.
these are all sort of in the same realm. realm. I've got us. Seals, Warriors, Mammoth, 3-4-5. Really like the way the Seals are playing. Good performance against Calgary, 17-12 over the weekend. And as we can see, these are our revealed rankings now. And the Seals, I just think, have the leg up with Dane Dobbie leading the league in goals now. He has 11. Big day against his old team. And Chiliano, 8 goals against average so far. Of course, the game against Colorado, big help there.
I like the goalie thing you talk about with the Seals because in the 4 spot with Vancouver, it's one of the reasons I've liked their start to the year. Alex Bouquet's playing really well. Leads the league in saves so far. And before this past week may have been a little different, but now you've got a lot more teams that have played 3 games. So 128 saves over the course of 3 games. He's being asked to do a lot, but he's getting it done. They're 2-1 so far with the tough loss, the tough one goal loss here to Saskatchewan last time out. I think Vancouver is up there to stay.
Yeah, I think that they did have a good start to their season. I want to see if they can maintain that. And like we said, they got off to a 2-0 start and then sort of have a bump in the road this last weekend. And then finally go to the Mammoth themselves and got to work on some things offensively. I've liked what we've seen from Connor Robertson, who came over from Saskatchewan in the offseason. He's got 8 points in 3 games. Before this season, 11 points in 11 games over the course of his couple-year career. So maybe they found something in him and he can be a part of their offense moving forward. So I think they have a little bit of work to do, but you got Dylan Ward in the back, and I think that's a good, consistent guy to have there for the Colorado Mammoth. Zed Williams has 7 points in 3 games. Probably we'll see as production go up as the year goes on, too.
Yeah, I mean, they're also going to go with Ryan Lee. Like, the Mammoth need Ryan Lee, I think, to have a giant year. If he does, I think they're going to be right there in the mix. And because at the back end, Dylan Ward is in that conversation for one of the best goalies in the league, up there with the likes of a Matt Vince. So you know you're what you're going to get from him. The question is, as we saw when they scored just 4 goals a couple of games ago, what do you do offensively? Can you score enough in order to win games? All right, so we gone through that middle part of the top 5. Let's look at the next handful of teams. We've got Toronto, the Rock at 2-1 at 6, the Wings at 7, the Nighthawks at 8. Who stands out in that mix for you?
You know, Holden Cattoni leads the league with 20 points this year.
I marked him down.
He with Georgia a couple of seasons ago at 86, I believe, and then 70-something the year before that as well. So he is a guy, and the Nighthawks, a team coming off that huge 16-7 win over Albany, and they had built themselves a little bit more towards the future. I know the future seems pretty soon now after, of course, their reinvigoration, reinvention of a franchise in Rochester, but that's such a good lacrosse, box lacrosse town, Rochester, and they do put a lot of people in there. I have friends who lived in there for a few years, like, yeah, those Nighthawks games are amazing. So I think the vibe will really help guide that franchise moving forward, and you sort of are starting to feel that now. I think they're pretty confident, Rochester, that they can make some noise this year.
Yeah, remember, they're expansion franchise, but they have the same ownership group, the Pagulas, as the Bandits. So you know the ownership group, what you're going to get from them. So you have to expect they're going to do everything they need to do to be competitive, even though it's really technically only year 2 of the Nighthawks franchise. Remember, same name, but they just scrapped, had to start
They're just
scratch.
Like the Riptide, yeah.
Right, exactly. The team we haven't gotten to yet, which may be surprising to some, is the Saskatchewan Rush. They come in at 9 in our power rankings. They're 1-2 so far this year. The win over Vancouver it was a big one for them because you avoid dropping to 0-3. What do you make of the Rush's start?
I think you could maybe see them in the 3 spot in like 2 weeks. I mean, 2 1-goal losses and then a win. I think that they will figure it out and will do it quickly. I love what they have on the back end. I mean, you just name the guys. They've got Rubish coming out that back door, Cornwall, Beers, who came over from the Warriors, all guys that will really help provide stability for them and consistency on a nightly basis, which I think is so important in this league. And, you know, guys, speaking of consistency, Mark Matthews, Robert Church, the guys you hear year after year in Saskatchewan who get it done, once again, doing just that. So I think they're going to be just fine, in my estimation.
It's like we're giving them some bulletin board material, having them so far down. At 10 and 11, we got Calgary and Georgia, a couple of teams who were playoff teams the last time, well, we're going to be likely playoff teams the last time we saw them play. With Calgary, Jesse King's one of the top scorers in the league with 19 points so far. I really like him. But you look back to, they're technically the quote-unquote defending champs.
Yeah.
The last time we crowned a champ, it was Calgary. A lot has changed since then. They've lost their leading scorer. He's now in San Diego. They lost their captain. He's now with New York. So the Roughnecks, it feels like they're still looking. They've got new colors and uniforms.
It's a bit of a reboot, if you will. We're not sure how long it will take for them to do so. Tough to defend a title a couple years removed anyway. So I mean, at the same time,
well, don't tell that to Virginia.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I think they've got some work to do. They have some cornerstones there, of course, but at the same time, I think they have a little bit of room to grow, and we'll see how long it takes them in a tough conference in the West.
Georgia all the way down at 11 seems really silly because they still have Lyle Thompson. I just don't know what to make of them after what we saw against Colorado.
Yeah, I think that it's Lyle and Shane Jackson and everybody else, and they're going to need to find other sources of offense and be able to do it on the back end too. So I think they have work to do. And I mean, Lyle, one of my bold predictions was he would lead the league in points, and I think maybe we saw a bit of that emerging in their last game. They beat New York 14-10, and Lyle had a big day there. So I think the offense, he's going to have to get used to it flowing through him again. And after Zed Williams, of course, moved on, Randy Stott's moving on as well. So I think they have a bit of an adjustment period. I think Lyle can adjust with the best of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, too, is the players adjusting with Lyle. Like, if you haven't played with Lyle Thompson, you talk to anybody in the field game, any one of the teams that he's jumped in, and the vision is different. Like, it's like playing with Jason Kidd on a basketball court. There are passes that you may not think are there that he knows are there.
It'll go by your head really quickly.
You got to be ready.
if you're not ready.
So I think there's an adjustment period altogether with some of the pieces offensively for Georgia, but I'm not too concerned. So it rounds out the final three. All three are winless. The Riptide, Firewolves, and Panther City Lacrosse Club. We like the Riptide there at 12. I mean, look, I know they're 0-3, and I know this is partially selfish because I've talked about them as a possible playoff team at the beginning of the year. But Kieran McCardle coming on and being one of the top scorers in the league so far through 3 games, I think is a huge bonus. Callum Crawford is picked up where he left off when he was in New England, so you know what you're getting there. And I think they just kind of got a bad break here. Jeff Teat ended up in the COVID protocols on a weekend where they had 2 games this past weekend. They go 0-2. I think they're better than 0-3, and I know you can say that and be like, oh, whatever, a couple weeks from now I could look stupid in saying that, but I really do think they're better than 0-3.
Yeah, I think of those 3 teams at the bottom, they're probably that have looked and might have the highest potential right now, you know, with Albany struggling and Panther City. They've had some close games, Panther City, so I mean, they could be able to trip up some teams down the road, but we all know that they're building and it's a new franchise as well. So that is what 3 winless teams, sort of take your pick.
By the way, shout out to the Firewolves. All they're doing off the floor, like they've got an alcohol drink that's labeled after them. They partnered with a distillery that they're selling at games and stuff.
Sure.
They're loaded up. So get to an Albany Firewolves game if you're up there in the capital region in New York. Speaking of upstate New York, a upstate New York guy, Long Island guy, spent some time at Cortland. That's where he went to school. Bill Tierney, the legend Bill Tierney, joining us now. So we're lucky enough to have Denver coach Bill Tierney joining us now. Coach, we appreciate the time. I've seen your schedule, and I just want to start with this. Like, after all the players you got from Andy Shea last year, you guys couldn't go to Yale this year? They got to come to Colorado?
Actually, that's a result of some other things that happened on our schedule. And I think with COVID, a bunch of people ended up not being sure of who was playing who when. And so we were going to go, we were going to have that date, March 12th, as an open date because Notre Dame decided not to play us. But Andy called and asked if we had an opening that day, and we just happened to have it. We needed, if you look at the schedule, we needed a really good home game like that, and so it just happened to work out. If it works out for next year, we'll go back to Yale.
Scheduling in 2020, post 2020, right? I mean, that's sort of how it works these days, I guess.
It's beautiful. Last year was funny because everybody had to change because we played everybody in our conference twice, and to a lot of people's disbelief, we ended up getting 17 games in, traveled 34,000 miles, and had a great year. So if last year was the hardest, then we'll get it right by next year, that's for sure.
Did things change forever after 2020, or now is it more of a back sort of to normal type of feel for you guys? I guess what is the dynamic, I guess, just mentality? Is life different forever, or are you sort of, okay, maybe back to a little bit more normal now?
You mean as far as lacrosse or the schedule?
Lacrosse-wise, as a team now, sort of looking at who you are, what you want to be, and just life in lacrosse in Denver.
Yeah, much more so. The biggest challenge right now is that we've got 2 classes of young men that are new to the culture. Really, our freshmen from last year, they lived in singles in the dorms, 24/7. We're in masks. We had to go with cohorts of 10 to 15 guys, so nobody was ever in the locker room together. Even on game days, we had to come out in groups of 10 or 15, depending on the group. And so last year's freshmen really had the hardest time of all. And then you bring in, another new group of 12 or 13 freshmen, and everybody's mixed up. But we had a great fall. Everybody's back in the locker room together, and hopefully it'll stay that way. And practicing on the field together as a group. So we're getting closer. I'd say it's probably going to be another year before it really comes back to the true norm.
Yeah, we joke about the Yale thing, but you guys did have a ton of talent that came in, and then you had to try to figure out how do you put them all together in a COVID world where everybody couldn't be together. In all your years, it was obviously one of the most unique. What did you learn from that experience in 2021?
Well, first of all, thankfully, Andy's kids, as you mentioned, Jackson Morrow and Lucas Kotler, and then later on T.D. Erlin, these are great young men, and they lived with 4 of our best young men in Danny Logan and Ethan Walker and Kyle Smith and who's the other one? Colin Squires. And so he had 7 of these really good young men, all capable of being captains, but certainly all leaders, living in a house built for 4 people. So it was a little bit different. TD and Jackson, basically, we're in a room side by side, but it tells you a lot about their character. It tells you a lot about the Yale kids and our guys for bringing them in seamlessly. And it was really, really different. It reminded me a lot of some of the maybe the first or second year here at Denver and the first or second year at Princeton, where you just have these groups of guys. You're trying to bring a culture together. You're trying to, at the end of the day, have them play together. And thankfully, our leaders in those 7 young men were able to pull that off.
How does now the fact that those guys move on, of course, to other things, how does that impact your roster as it currently stands? Obviously, I'd imagine some spots to be filled competitively at that. I mean, you've got some of those guys coming back, and Jack Hanna and Ted Sullivan, Alex Simmons, to name a couple. But after that, I guess I wonder, you sort of have to fill those spots now, right? And after what was a pretty probably stacked depth chart from a year ago.
Well, it's interesting because the more you watch lacrosse, the more you see that the positions that get you through it all are face-offs and goalies. And we've got a great goalie coming back. Jack Thompson's a 2-year starter, and a great face-off guy coming back in Alex Stathikas. So with those 2, and then the guys you mentioned, it's really an interesting team. A lot of people would look at our roster and see how many freshmen and sophomores we have and say, wow, they're really young. But if you look really closely at if we had a game tomorrow, what our team would look like is the first 14 or 15, other than one freshman, Mick Kelly, would be juniors, seniors, and 50-year guys. Where our youth comes in and where our hard work comes in is who fills in behind them. Those are the spots that need to be filled. Obviously, we don't have an Ethan Walker. Obviously, we don't have a Jackson Morrow getting the ball to Ethan Walker. But we do have enough young men in the program that we feel can fill those positions. How they fill them will determine how well we play. But we've got our whole defense back. All those guys are all our first 4, other than Colin Squires. Our first 5 polls are back. And certainly Malik Sparrow and AJ Mercurio at the pole, and then Adam Hanglin and Jack DiBenedetto. They've all played a lot of lacrosse. Probably the biggest position we've got to fill is our short stick position, because Danny Logan, who's in my opinion, the best in the game, and Kyle Smith, who started for 3 years with Danny. That's going to be the big one to fill. So it's what you see and what you hear about graduating those guys, the ones you mentioned, and a few others, impact guys. That on paper is the truth. The reality, though, is we feel really good about the first 14 or 15, and the fall proved to us to be very confident in the ones who are going to fill in those vacant spots.
I think it's fascinating. Every year you have a graduating class that leaves, and they're good players and people have to fill the roles. But in your case, I feel like there are kind of generational type players that are kind of like a face of a program, especially for us who get a chance to cover teams nationally. And for you guys, for like 3 years now, 4 years, if you include the bonus year, it's been Ethan Walker. And you've had guys like a Wes Berg or a Connor Cannizzaro has been that guy over the course of your time there at Denver. How have you felt like these years, these transitional years where you lose a guy like Ethan Walker, who is highly regarded across the country, he leaves, and then there's almost like this hole when it comes to who's going to be the guy with your program? How have you felt like those years are maybe different than years when you have an Ethan Walker or Cannizzaro or Berg coming back?
It is the question. And, Ron Graham, who used to be our associate AD for he's retired 2 years ago now, but he used to say to me each year, it seems like, you lose a Mark Matthews and a Jeremy Noble, and people say, okay, they're done. And then all of a sudden you got a Wes Berg, and then they're done. And then you got Ethan Walker and Danny Logan, and they're going to say we're done again. There are people in our program, and this is why our culture has been really good. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with as a coach. COVID gave us the chance to keep those guys around for one more year, and we're so thankful for that. But JJ Silstrop and Drew Erickson, they're great lacrosse players. You mentioned Alex Simmons and Teddy Sullivan and Jack Hanna. These are great lacrosse players, and sometimes it's built around depth and the number of guys you played. We've played a lot of people here over the years. Maybe some games you got to shorten that roster, and if we have to do that early in the year, maybe we will. But we also believe that we've got some people. Caleb Kuber, who was the Division II highest scorer, or right up there anyway, is come in. We have a young man, that kind of nobody knows about, a Western Canadian kid, a kid named Casey Wilson, who's very good. We've got a couple of freshmen. I mentioned Mick Kelly, but we got Noah Manning, who's a big-time scorer, come in. So, look, we never want to lose. We never will forget the name Ethan Walker. He is just one of the most fantastic young men I've ever been around, besides being our career high scorer. Danny Logan, who's getting one of the NCAA major awards in the next month. We'll never forget those guys. But if you bemoan the fact too much, it sets the young guys back a little bit. So the excitement this fall was exactly what you guys said is, hey, there's spots to be earned. And maybe we have to play a little differently than we did with Ethan. But I have all the confidence in the world in Matt Brown and John Gallant and our staff to get the job done and be a really good lacrosse team.
I know as a program you take great pride in sort of developing the guys into what that could be in terms of the Ethan Walkers of the world. But, when it comes to recruiting them to begin with, just coming out of high school, how much, finding some of the guys, how much has that changed for you and the approach and the competitiveness that has come around the landscape of the sport maybe since you first started out between then and now, and trying to find those maybe diamonds in the rough or the top prospects that you think can become that in your program?
Well, we always kid, and I've said this to Ty, because so I'm not talking out of school, but we call ourselves the non-Ty Zanders. We are the guys who never have a top 10 recruit, never have, everybody's 5-star All-American, never have this. And then it's kind of funny that we take that as motivation. We want guys that have a little chip on their shoulder. Certainly Coach Brown has a lot better insight to the Canadian kids than most, because he's the under-19 and the Canadian national team head coach. So we have insight into those guys. We also know that Colorado kids and kids from all that aren't your top Baltimore guy or top Long Island guy, we also know there's pretty good lacrosse players. So what we look for here is young men that carry that chip on their shoulder a little bit, carry that motivation to knock off some of those top 10 guys. Next fall we'll have a young man coming in from Kansas City, and in 12 years, he will represent a player on our roster from the 33rd different state that we've had guys, and we've done pretty well. So, are we going to be the 2015 team with Westberg and Connor Cannizzaro? I don't know if that team will ever be replicated, but we're still going to battle and fight till the end, and hopefully compete for a national championship.
Well, I think along those lines, I was thinking about it because I think at one point when you go out to Denver and then you win the national championship, there was like this intrigue, and it was almost like anybody who is not from a hotbed, you guys had a chance to get. But now I feel like every school, whether you're from a hotbed or not, like the top programs, they want the same guys you're getting because you've had success with guys from a Colorado or a Texas or wherever else across the country. And these players are traveling all over the place to travel for tournaments. So they're getting seen. What's the competition level like for you guys trying to compete for even guys that aren't from hotbed areas now that maybe used to be a more of a gimme for you, being that you were maybe the closest Division I school to them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Travis. And we used to call our recruiting blueprint the 3 C's. Colorado, Canada, and California. Now we call it CCE. Colorado, Canada, and everywhere else, because other people have caught on. The California kids, some of those top kids, they don't seem to look at how close we are, and so they'll fly over the Rockies to go out east, and good for those coaches to find out. The other ones have found out a lot about the Canadian kids. Tom mentioned before that, we take great pride. I think there's 3 or 4 programs in the country that really work on development. And our kids know that. If you get kids that aren't playing that great high school lacrosse in Baltimore, that great high school lacrosse in Long Island or Philly, what you have to do is recognize that they're still good players. They're still great athletes. We know who we're targeting. We know what we need. And so what you hope to do is convince young men to come to Denver, believing in them and believing that once they get past that competitive level that maybe they didn't have quite that much in high school, the sky's the limit for them as players. And we've had guys over the years, that have come from here, come from California, come from all over the place. We've had great ones from Ohio now. So it doesn't bother us very much. We just come in and coach the guys that show up here. We recruit families as well as young men. We don't poach. And so we go after guys that want to be pioneers and believe that that's the way to go with our coaching style.
And it feels like you said, there's that last statement, we don't poach. And I think for you, there's a lot of respect that comes with that and a lot of pride in how you do things still. Obviously things have changed since you first started, Coach, and, you still maintain some of those standards that it sounds like that you've started with back in the day when you began.
Yeah, I think there are things that happen in life, and certainly one of the things that I'm highly aware of now is making sure that kids recognize the strength of my coaching staff. I got Matt Brown, who in my mind is the best coach in the game, not just offensive coordinator, but coach in the game. John Gallant, who played 15 years in the NLL, so he knows how to coach a guy on how to play defense. And then Eric Adamson, a young man who's our volunteer, who the kids can really relate to. As I always say to them, if there's family issues or school issues or discipline issues, you're going to have to come see me. But if you want to talk music and Xbox, and you want to do individual film and talk about what goes on in social life these days, go see the young guys. That's all good. What I've learned is to at least try to keep up with that. But old school rears its ugly head sometimes, and I think that's a good way, because what's happened in our game now is the whole poaching thing, the whole negative recruiting, talking negatively about other coaches or other teams or other programs, that has become now a little bit of the norm. And the excuse for it is, well, everybody's doing it. Well, everybody's not doing it, and everybody doesn't have to do it. What I think you have to do as a head coach and in building a culture is have your norms, have your standards, and make sure you stick with them so that your kids know what to expect. Some of this other stuff that goes on, you bring in 10, 11 guys from, and I'm not talking about this fifth year thing. This is going to go away in 2 more years. I'm talking about the whole idea of, knowing a great player committed to somewhere else. And oh, by the way, we now have the other side, and I talked about this at our convention last week, is the other side of this is it's not just coming from the coach to the player. Now we're having fathers and families tell their sons, and coaches, high school coaches, not so much, but some club coaches will tell a young man, grab a spot. If somebody asks you to commit to them, and then keep in the back of your mind that there might be something better coming along the way. But how are we raising our kids to do that? And we've had that happen to us. And to be honest with you, I'm glad they're gone.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and it takes away from their word. You give somebody your word, like, hey, I'm committing to your program. It should mean something.
I often tell recruits and their families, my dad was a beer truck driver, and when I was 16 or 17 years old, I didn't think he was very smart, but he had a few things that he said, and he'd always say, don't go into sports if you don't recognize that there's always a winner and there's always a loser. The second thing was never be a liar. And then the third thing that I use a lot in recruiting, and I think it's important, and we had a young man commit to us last week that Coach Brown, who believes in the same things I believe in, said to him, don't commit to us until you're 100% sure. And the third thing my dad said was a handshake is one of the most important things in life. And so when we say to recruits, don't shake our hands unless you're 100% sure. Even that hasn't worked a couple of times, but for the most part, the families hear that, the dads hear that, the moms hear that, and there's a lot of good in our country and a lot of good people that want to keep those kind of standards alive.
All right, so I want to leave you with this because I think it's been a couple of years since I asked you. When are you going to know that whatever year is going to be it?
It's funny, Travis. A lot of things come into mind. This year, some of my friendly peers have been, and I find this out from our recruits, have been intimating, oh, you don't want to go to Denver. Coach T's going to be retiring soon. Well, let me tell you, as I said earlier, first of all, Coach Brown's the best coach in the game. So, I could die tomorrow, and these kids would have at least as good or maybe even better experience. Some of them will have to deal with me if they're not doing well in school or something like that. But I'm a terrible golfer. I'm not a good fisherman. I try to read, but I don't read a lot. So I often look at this thing and say, well, yeah, but what would I do? I've been blessed, especially since I've moved out here to Colorado. I've been blessed with good health. I got a great wife who takes care of me more like a little baby than a grown man, and has stuck by me for 45 years. I don't know why she has, but I'm thankful she has. And so, with all that in mind, with the health, with the enjoyment, with the love of these kids, and how much energy they put into it, with the great stories like Ethan Walker and Jackson Morrill, getting a chance to play together. All these things just keep me going. And maybe at some point, we talk to recruits about this, Matt Brown takes over as the head coach. He's not going to get rid of me. That just means I don't have to sit in the sun for 12 hours a day in the summer. I'll become the volunteer and let those other three do the crazy recruiting stuff. But it's I hate to think about it, but I'm probably going to die on the field.
Hey, they keep you young, and there could be worse places to be outside all year round than Denver, Colorado. Like, you get snow 2 hours ago, and then it's sunny and 50, later in the day.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, our school has done an amazing job with the COVID protocol. Right outside my office is the area where they do the vaccines and do the testing and all that. And we've been under 1% for months and months and months. And when a young man or young woman gets COVID, they're quickly isolated so it doesn't spread. And so when you've got the support of your administration, which I do here at Denver, our athletic department administration is phenomenal. Carlton Creech and Brandon McNeil, who are my supervisors, when they believe in you and they support you the way they do, and the kids come in believing in you, it's what else could be better? And so I'm going to stick with this as long as I can.
That's why year after year we see Denver as one of the talks of the town and across the national landscape as well. Bill Tierney, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you guys suit up this season.
Thank you guys for having me on. And, I appreciate you guys so much. I really do. And you're so great for the game. And just know that it comes back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach. That means the world.
Thank you, guys.
So a huge thank you to Bill Tierney for joining us on the show. Gave us a ton of time, and he's always a great person to talk to with anything going on in the sport, because he's been around for a few years, and he's got some good opinions.
And what's refreshing about him is he's not a coach speak guy by any stretch.
No, he tells you how he feels.
I think we've been lucky, Lars and Bill Tierney sort of back to back here, where you really get a good insight into how their mind works and how they try to build a program and a team, and in a very different way, too.
Yes.
They're very different people, but you got to love the insight they bring just in an organic conversation like the one we have.
Great lacrosse minds, both of them. All right, let's talk about some college lacrosse. We
Yeah.
continue our previews, as you can see by the graphic. If you're watching, it's America East time. You want to kick us off? Who's your men's pick in the America East?
I like Vermont this year.
Ooh, the Catamounts.
They come in. I mean, they beat Albany last year to win it, so they were the favorite last year, of course, coming out, and I think they're going to do it again. They returned their top 10 scorers from 2021. And, when you look through sort of what's happening in the lacrosse world and you see, these extra years been given, there's a lot of teams with a lot of people back, but it's rare to find one with 10 top scorers returning. And not only that, they also bring back their face-off guy, Tommy Burke, 69.8% face-offs last year, which that's a really good number considering what some of the records are. And I know that might pale in comparison to what Sisselberger did, but still, you take that out of the equation, that outlier of Sisselberger, I mean, that's one of the best in the country. So I like Vermont a lot. I think they have enough back in the 16th best offense in the country in 2021 where they can get the job done. Tough non-conference schedule as well, which I think will get them ready for conference play at Duke, at Penn State, at Brown, all in store for them schedule-wise. So I think Vermont might have what it takes to win this again.
Remember, people were talking about them when they went up to the Carrier Dome last year and played Syracuse. They had probably some of the most electric goals we saw in the Dome last year.
They did.
In that game.
Pretty good defense as well. They got their long stick midi back. They got Will Jones, a senior defenseman, back as well. And think about this name. I know they got 10 scorers back, and I think he was like 9th in the list. Stone Jacobs, a junior midfielder, which is a great, great name.
It's an amazing
You got a guy like Stone Jacobs running out of your midfield. Watch out. Stone's coming for you.
By the way, finally got to visit Burlington about a month or so ago. Foam Brewers in Burlington, right by the water. Great spot.
Is there some foliage?
Just after the foliage season. Got a little bit of snow. It was right at the beginning of the first snow of the year up there at Vermont. Burlington is beautiful. So shout out to the Catamounts. You're in a good spot. Cold in February and March when you start to play, but great spot to visit.
Are you going to pick them?
No. I love Burlington. I really, really do. But I'm going to go with the University at Albany. The Great Danes, look, I know they had, last year was an up and down year. You had everything with Dehoga Nanticoke when he was part of the team and then eventually no longer part of the team. They lose Jacob Patterson, he was their leading scorer, had been a big part of this program for the last couple of years. But I think it's kind of time for a reboot. Like, everything from that Final Four team is kind of gone.
Yeah.
So Scott Marr, it's not like this team isn't getting talent. They've gotten talent continuously in terms of recruits to come in here. So I think with Nanticoke gone, obviously Fields has come and gone, Patterson's out of the picture. I think this is a great time to reboot. And you look at what they have coming back offensively. Got a guy in Camden Hay who's really good. Graydon Hogg from the Hill Academy is a terrific scorer, a lefty. I like him. Will Ramos is back in goal. He got a taste of some starts at the end of the season. He's back, so I like him. And you mentioned the tough non-conference schedule for Vermont. Albany is just freaking loaded. They've got Maryland, they've got Yale, they got Syracuse finally coming to the Capital District this year. Mark that down, a Thursday in April. That's going to be electric if Albany can have a decent start to the season. So they're going to be battle tested as well. And I think what we saw in the America East last year is this thing is wide open.
It is, yeah. And you never know.
For a team with a staff and Scott Marr that has gotten it done and gotten all the way to championship weekend, I like them in the mix of all the battles that's going to happen in the America East, because I think it's pretty wide open again. I like them to somehow figure out a way to win the tournament.
It was not tough picking a favorite in this conference. You know, when you look at Vermont,
you really couldn't have gone wrong.
I was a little surprised you went with Albany, knowing it's a little bit unknown of what they're going to have now in the post-Dehoga era. I mean, Stony Brook, they do bring back some guys. Dylan Palinetti was a really, really good player last year for them, their leading scorer.
UMBC's really good. They made the tournament a couple of years ago.
They bring back their last two leading scorers and a couple of their defensemen as well, and a pretty good goalie in Tommy Lingner, 9.18 goals against average. So they have those top four. I mean, it's hard to pick between the four of them. So
yeah,
it's going to be really competitive all year long.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conference. So keep an eye on the America East. But I got Albany. You got Vermont. Women's side, who do you have?
On the opposite end of the spectrum, I guess the question is, why will once again Stony Brook defend their title? I think we're both on the same boat here.
100%.
The Stony Brook women have been at the top of this conference now, pretty much dominating it over the past few years here with Joe Spallina as the head coach. I mean, last year made a little bit of that run in the NCAA tournament. They lost to North Carolina, gave North Carolina maybe their best game of that tournament before they lost. 14-11 was that score. So they lose a couple of their big-time players that we've seen. Taryn O'Miller had over 100 points last year, maybe quietly at times, I think. Almost they've had so many prolific scorers over the years. It's almost she scored 100-plus points, and then you lose Allie Kennedy, who did it all for them, and one of the best players in the world right now in the women's game.
Yeah, the biggest question is, all right, we've had all these stars. First, it was Courtney Murphy and Kylie O'Miller, and they have their run and break a bunch of records and leave. And then stepping in is Taryn O'Miller and Allie Kennedy, and they break some records and lead to new heights, part of Team USA, blah, blah, and they leave. And so now the question is, who's next? And you look at some of the different pieces that they have. I really like Kaylin Hart. She was the one that scored that crazy goal in the Carrier Dome in 2020 that went all over Sports Center when I think she was just a freshman. I like her offensively. They bring back Ellie Macera, who had 17 goals last year. And they also have a transfer from UAlbany in Kyla Zapolsky as they try to bolster that offense. When you lose a midfielder in Allie Kennedy with all her talents and Taryn O'Miller, you got to try to figure out a way to fill some holes. So they bring her in. And I think even if there's not a next star that emerges, whether it's the next Allie Kennedy or next Kylie O'Miller, I think the sum of the parts is probably, and this is what USA Lacrosse Magazine said when they're picked top 10 in USA Lacrosse Magazine's preseason. And maybe it's the sum of the parts and all the different talent all over the field that makes this team the team to beat in the America East, instead of just a handful of stars that are shining the brightest.
It feels like Massera might be that next star. I believe they're pretty high on her on Long Island for sure. And don't forget about their goalie, Cameron Halsall, playing goalie for Team Canada back there in the spring, in the Fall Classic, those games that I called over the course of October, whatever it was. But
she's got a bunch of experience with Team Canada.
She's got a lot of experience on that stage, which obviously is so huge for a college player to be able to do that in the midst of her career. Had a really good year last year, a 9.5 goals against average, and I think that having that for them is really important, with the fact that their offense gets off a lot of shots, a really exciting style of play, and be able to have a backstop to begin those transition opportunities will really bode well, like you said, for maybe some new stars to emerge.
And I'm not picking against Joe Spallina.
Yeah, it's hard. That's the tough thing to do. UAlbany probably the second fiddle in the conference. They returned Katie Pascal, their leading scorer from a year ago. So they could challenge if they get things going, but Stony Brook seems to be the favorite once again.
All right, let's move to the MAAC, the other MAAC. You had an A in the middle there. On the men's side, I'll go first here because I think the pick that I have is maybe a little intriguing after last season. I'm going with the Red Foxes of Marist. They played just 4 games all of last season. If you're on social media, Lacrosse Twitter, it was blowing up throughout down the stretch of the year. People were complaining. There were parents having issues. The season basically got shut down for about a month or so during the middle of the year because of COVID issues. Players were saying, like, we're all good, we're being tested, but the school kept it shut down. Eventually, they did come back and play. They finished 3-1. They had a 1-goal loss in the conference tournament, but they return like everybody. And this was a really talented team last year. Like, if you remember back before COVID shut things down in 2020, one of the big non-conference games, it was on a Tuesday, was Marist knocking off Army after Army had already had a couple of big wins. They were a top 10, top 15 team at the time.
Johnny Surdick was on that team.
Yeah.
I think Nick Turn was a freshman that year, right?
Yes, I believe so. Marist knocked them off like 17-9, blew them out. It was a really impressive game. And all the guys from that game and from last year, the limited time we saw them, are all back. Jojo Pareca's really good. Both of the Embry twins are terrific. Jason Intermisoli is really good in the midfield. I mean, they bring back everything. And you don't think they're going to be hungry to have a full season this year after they're held to just 4 games? So I'm going Marist, and I think I probably would have picked them last year if they only got a couple more games in. But with everything they went through, just to be in the conference tournament, they had to feel lucky, and then to compete was just awesome for them. But not having a whole season puts you a little behind the 8 ball in terms of trying to put together a team to compete at that time of the year. So I think full season, I like the Red Foxes.
Yeah, word is that nobody really wanted to play them. Everybody knew how good they were last year, and obviously that taken away was really tough, and they were really able to reestablish themselves. And Monmouth ended up going in and getting the bid and winning the championship in the conference. So good for Monmouth to be able to take advantage of that. But also, you have another team that had something taken away. Is that Quinnipiac, who at the end of their season weren't even able to play in the conference tournament. So they are going to be my pick to go on.
Oh,
and win,
you like the Bobcats?
I think that they played their last game of the year. Let's see, it was against Detroit Mercy. And then, no, the game was canceled against Detroit Mercy. They came back, Marist, in one of their games back. They played Marist, and then they had their last game of the year against Detroit Mercy canceled, weren't allowed to play due to COVID and whatnot in that tournament. So they're also a team that's very hungry. They're also a team that returns the majority of their attack unit, a lot of their midfield offensively and defensively as well. And they're another team with a really good face-off guy, Dimitri George, 74% last year in this conference. So you got a guy, you got the possession a lot, and Quinnipiac, we know as a team year after year, are sort of near that top part of that conference and find themselves in the conversation, at least in the championship game. I think they're going to have some feelings that, hey, we didn't get our shot at the end of 2021. Let's get back there and prove what we can do. So I think I like Quinnipiac. And it's despite, I know Marist has a lot of guys coming back, but also hard to judge them after not playing so many games last year. I mean, they only played 4 games. And Quinnipiac didn't play like 6 or 7 games total. So I do like Quinnipiac to come out of the MAAC this year, too.
Quinnipiac, a beautiful little campus in Connecticut.
Yes.
Spot.
Yeah, quite nice.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn to the women's side.
Getting the geography as we go along here.
Just helping people out. On the women's side here in the MAAC, I'm going to go with Fairfield, the defending champs, the Stags. In the women's conference, they're in the MAAC. The men's, Fairfield's in the CAA. On the women's side, they had 5 players with 30 or more points last year. 4 of those players are back. They lose their top scorer, but Kelly Horning, who scored 47 points, she's back. And also, this is just, when I was looking through their stats from last year, reminded me that their goalie, Olivia Conquest, she has to have the best name in the conference.
Yeah, I think so. That works.
They lost just 1 game all of last season in the conference. I like them to repeat.
I mean, it's not Stone Jacobs for Vermont.
But Stone isn't playing in the MAAC conference.
I know. I'm just saying it's not Stone Jacobs. But Conquest is also quite good. I agree with you. I think Fairfield has what it takes. They return 3 40-plus point scorers from a year ago as well. And then you get a look. I mean, I feel like this is something you hear coaches and players talk about all the time that want to get to that next level. They played BC in the NCAA tournament a year ago, and they lost. What was the final score? I have it somewhere around here. 19-6. Pause for dramatic effect. So you get to see what the champion did to you. I think that there's a lot of lessons that come away from that. And I think that's something that teams use quite often to help them and fill in some of those gaps and those holes. And maybe look for Fairfield to use that and take that with them and maybe try to win a first-round game in the tournament this year and at least do well in the conference at the very least.
So you're going with the Stags as well?
I am going with Fairfield as well. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, I think, Marist, another team that just like the men's side of things, they had a bunch of their season taken away due to some COVID stuff going on there. They had a shutdown. 5 games were postponed, and they lost a bunch after they came back out of that. And they took Fairfield to the brink in the quarterfinals of the tournament, 14-13 in overtime. So Marist, another team to watch for, another team that might be pretty hungry in the MAAC for the women too.
All right, there are your picks here for our conference previews in the America East and MAAC. We'll take a break from picks in the college previews next week before we get back to some picks here in the new year. Speaking of the women's thing, for one final thought before we go here, Tom, a shout out to Hallie Quillen-Griggs, who is leaving Inside Lacrosse after a number of years to go do some other stuff, but she has been a huge friend of this show and LSN. She's done a bunch of games for us. And so shout out to Hallie for all she's done for the women's game. Her impact on the women's game has just been immense. And so thank you to everything that you've done post your Syracuse lacrosse career. I had a chance to go to Syracuse with Hallie, so our ties go way back to Orange Country. But Hallie, thank you for everything. You've been terrific.
Using the platform to help the women's game, help the sport move forward, beyond her playing career, which I think is a lasting legacy that anybody would want to have.
Few people have done more for the sport as a whole on the women's side over the last several years than Hallie, so shout out to you. But that's all the time we have. We will see you right back here next week. Have a great Christmas if you celebrate, and happy holidays. We'll see you before the new year.
Merry Christmas, everyone.